So, how many designers do we have in the room? Not bad, not bad. Keep your hand up if you have used or you continue to use the command line as part of your workflow. Okay, cool. The Egger brothers did a great job of introducing their philosophy of a reimagined sort of responsive workflow. And I thank them for that. It was a great job, kind of setting me up for this. I'm not going to do any philosophy. This is going to be a tools talk. And in fact, it's basically a technical demo. But I want to point out that at the end of the day, it's not about the tools that we use. It's about getting stuff done. And that's what I'm about today. These are just some tools that I like for certain types of projects. There are hundreds of ways to do this stuff. The main point is saving time. So how can we save time? How can we speed up our workflow? How can we avoid doing mind-numbing repetitive tasks and extra keystrokes and mouse clicks and iterate quickly on our designs and get down to addressing important questions facing the needs of our project? So we're going to talk about designing in the browser, and I hope this is something of a companion piece to what the Egger brothers talked about. And I'm going to move pretty fast because there's a lot I want to cover, but this is not going to be a tutorial. It's going to be kind of like an intro, like check out what you can do. I'm going to start with a quick overview of my basic setup for doing design in the browser, followed by some command line tools that I like to use. And then we're going to do a quick demo about how to scaffold out a project really quickly, followed by a demo about generating screenshots to present to the client. And then finally, we're going to design with real data, make a UI based on real data. This is the old me, and with photoshopped earbuds. And you'll see this guy a few times because he's here to remind me sort of the way I used to do things and how much time I'm saving by doing things a new way. My design career started right here on the original Mac, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world. I spent hours doing stuff like this in Mac Paint, just sketching. This isn't my drawing, unfortunately. I don't have any of my original masterpieces from those days. I draw mostly, I was drawing like Michael Jordan and my baseball heroes and stuff like that. So in a way, my life hasn't changed that much since I was a kid. I still make images on a Mac. When I learned about this thing called the World Wide Web, I immediately wanted to learn how to create visuals in that platform. So I kind of stumbled into front-end development as a result of my curiosity about how to do stuff in this technology, using web browser technology as a canvas, essentially. So for text editor, I use Sublime Text, and I'm just going to do a quick demo of why I use Sublime. If you save an index.html, it's something in HTML, you can use HTML snippets in Sublime. So I can just type doctype and hit tab, and it just scaffolds out a page for me with the basic valid structure. Then I can type nav and hit tab, and it'll give me a basic nav list. I can just fill in really quickly. It's easy to wrap tags around things or just create tags. So I'm going to create a quick header, create an H1 tag, type ugly title in it, create a P tag, give it some generic class. I'm creating a subheader. And then if I go down and I type dummy and hit tab, I get a paragraph of Kafka, which is pretty fucking cool. It even includes a link to a style sheet, which of course doesn't exist yet because this is just one page. But we can create it really quick. We can make a CSS folder. We can create a style.css document, save it, and then I'll just add one selector and one declaration. And you can see how it's coloring the syntax correctly because it knows I'm writing CSS, right? If we save this as a Sass document, however, I'll just create some generic Sass syntax. And you'll see it's white. It doesn't know that I'm trying to write Sass. But the cool thing about Sublime is I can really quickly install a plugin for Sass. With a keystroke, I can open up the package control. I can search for Sass. I can hit return. It takes like 3 seconds. It's installed. I don't even have to reopen the program. And I can go down to this menu and select Sass. And now it's coloring the syntax correctly. So it's for any language you want to write in, you can do a plugin for Sublime, and it's super cool. So moving on. Next, we need a browser, of course. And I like to use the dev tools in Chrome. Anybody use the dev tools in Chrome on a regular basis? Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to open up that HTML page really quick, and we're just going to kind of use the dev tools as a sandbox to give it some styles. I sped this up a little bit. I don't really style this quickly, but close. So I'm creating a beautiful title out of my ugly title, kind of taking it in a more Swiss direction. And so now I'm more or less happy with my title. I'm going to just copy this CSS directly from the dev tools and paste them into Sublime Text to my CSS document, hit save, go back to the browser, and it's a beautiful title already. So those are the basic tools that you need to do design in the browser, right? It's obvious. And that's basically how I worked for a long time. I would create a file from scratch. I would tweak it in the dev tool. I would install a library like jQuery manually and add a link to it and add more libraries when I needed. And then at some point I discovered things that you can do with the command line. So I needed a terminal for that. Terminal's tricky. And when you first open the terminal on a Mac, this is what it looks like. And you know, it's a very powerful tool, but it's not what I would call sexy. So I use a very sexy terminal environment called Oh My Z Shell. I think you have to pronounce it like that too. You can tab through directories, for example. There's all sorts of plugins and themes you can install. This is great because you don't need to know in your head what's in the directory that you're in. It gives you a beautiful prompt. You have color coding for your path, and then there's color coding for your Git repository. So if my repository is dirty, it's orange. It shows me which branch I'm on. And then if I make commits, it turns green. So it's just these helpful little things that make it somehow more visual for a designer. It's a lot more fun. So that's the basic setup. And like I said, the terminal opens up lots of possibilities to use a whole range of tools, which to a designer really feel like magic. So what are these tools? Well, there's Git, of course. And Git is obviously for version control, for making a branch of your work, for saving snapshots of your work at various stages, for collaborating with other people. You can do a Sir branch a lot, like the Egger brothers said. But I also use Git to deploy my work to the server to show to clients and colleagues. And this is the old way of deploying. And I find this is, of course, you have to know what you need to copy over. You have to copy it over correctly. You might forget files that you're supposed to copy over. I find this very error-prone and tedious. And once I learned that I could just write one command on the command line, and Git will just replace everything it needs to replace and delete things that don't need to be there anymore, I was pretty psyched. Node.js is a tricky one because I don't know what the hell it does. Really, it's just kind of like it's like a server that you run locally. It's a JavaScript-based runtime environment, and I don't care. But I have to install it because everything else runs in it. These other tools run in it. So just install it. You'll be glad you did. Then there's NPM, which is the Node Package Manager. And it's just like the name says, it's a package manager. It helps you install software to your project that has been put together by other people. It has lots of other dependencies. It manages for you. You don't have to worry about chasing down libraries and stuff. It just gets installed for you. So that package manager saves a lot of time. Bower is also a package manager, but it's dedicated to web packages, web production packages. And a good example of a package for Bower would be Bootstrap. So if I make a new directory in the terminal, call it boots, I just type Bower install Bootstrap, and it just downloads everything it needs. It downloads the Bower files, it downloads jQuery because Bootstrap needs jQuery. It takes a couple seconds, and here's what it gives us. We have this Bower components folder with Bootstrap folder and all the Bootstrap crap, and then you have this jQuery folder with all the jQuery stuff. So that's Bower. Super helpful. Then there's Grunt. Grunt is a task runner. It automates tedious tasks. So like if you want to use a style pre-processor like Sass, you need to have those files compiled. So Grunt can do that for you. It can launch a browser. It can compile your Sass files. It can refresh the browser page When it's done, whenever you change a little thing in one file, it just recompiles, launches the browser, refreshes the page, and you see your work. So super helpful. That's just one tiny example of the kind of thing you can do with a task runner like Grunt. There's hundreds and hundreds of plugins for Grunt. Then there's a tool called Yeoman. Yeoman is a scaffolding tool. And the core of Yeoman is something called a generator. A Yeoman generator, there's generators for all sorts of types of projects. There's generators for an Angular project. There's a generator for a WordPress project. There's a generator for an Ionic project or a 3JS project. And for lack of a better way of describing it, it's like it builds a project for you. It's like a starter kit. You install a Yeoman generator, and it says, I know what you need for a project like that. Here it is. So once you get those tools on your machine, and I have this slide here to kind of stop myself for a second because it's not necessarily that easy. I'm making it sound super easy. And when I first started trying to get these tools installed on my machine, it was a bit of a pain in the ass. I had to have other package managers for my particular operating system, like Homebrew, and I had to learn about the path variable, and I didn't know anything about this, so I was a lot of Googling, a lot of Stack Overflowing, but eventually I got it up and running, and then it's like smooth sailing. So don't give up if you're just starting out with these tools. So those are the tools, and once you get them installed on your machine, they kind of just sit there like hidden, like ninjas. They just wait for your command. So, yes. So let's look at how these tools play together. So our first demo is how to scaffold a responsive design project in under 3 minutes. And one problem I found myself having a lot when I began doing designs in the browser was that every time I started a project, I felt like I had to reinvent the wheel. Like I was saying, I needed a blank HTML page. I needed to start with an HTML page. So I would Google, okay, basic valid HTML structure. And then, every time, then I would have to type a link into the JavaScript file and pull in the JavaScript dependencies. And what if I mistyped the link? I'd always have to look up what the structure, what the syntax was for linking a JavaScript file to my file. And it would just take so long every time I started a new thing. And on and on and on. Now we have this Yeoman generator. This is how we install a Yeoman generator. npm I for install, the G tag or flag is for global, because I want to have it on my machine for later, for other projects. So I just need to do this one time. I install this generator. In this case, I'm installing a generator called web app. And I sped this video up a little bit, but I wanted to show the whole thing because I want you to see exactly how long it takes. That took about 1 minute and 12 seconds. It downloaded all the dependencies for the generator. And then we just need to run it for the first time for our project. It says, out of the box I include HTML5 boilerplate, jQuery, and a grunt file to build your app. What more would you like? Sass, Bootstrap, Modernizer? Why not? Let's go for it. It immediately creates all these files. It creates a folder called app with a bunch of stuff in it. And now it says, I'm running npm and bower install for you to install the required dependencies. So it's just pulling everything it needs. These files are telling it to pull down. And again, this is where I usually get up and get a coffee, because it usually takes a couple minutes, but a couple minutes in the scope of the whole project is not that big a deal. When you see what it's doing for us, it's installing some image optimization tools and some other matrix things. No idea what it's doing. And then and then Bower is doing its thing, and now it's done. Okay, done. So if we open up the directory that it just poured everything into, we have this app folder where there's fonts and images and scripts and styles, and there's this index.html page with a fully scaffolded out web page with some placeholder content. There's the Bower components folder where Bower put everything it grabbed. There's a node modules, mostly grunt tasks that npm pulled down. We have some config files. We have this git ignore file, which is really cool. This is telling Git what not to version, because we don't want to version our dependencies, because those are just going to be installed by somebody else who clones the repository. We just want to version the stuff we're changing. We want to version our app folder. We want to version our grunt file, things like that. And the generator knows that. So it's helping us out already. It's like if you initialize a repository here, Don't worry about the grunt file. I've already taken care of that for you. You're not going to version control bullshit. Then we have this Bower file, which tells Bower what to get, and we have this package JSON file, which tells npm what to get. And here's the beautiful, magical grunt file. This is telling grunt what to do and when and how and where to put files and stuff. It's not as scary as it looks, and it's really commented out well. You can just go through it and read, this is the task that does, and this is the task that does your images and makes them smaller. And here's the magical line right here. Grunt register task serve. Start the server and preview your app. Oh, I have an app. Grunt serve. It's doing some stuff. And it launches a browser, and it launches a web page. And it's based on Bootstrap. It's technically responsive, even though it's not that much to it right now. Another really cool thing, this browser sync live reload. This is our local file that the path that we just looked at, localhost 9000. It says external. I wonder what that is. If I go to this URL on another device that's on the same network, like a phone or another laptop or something, not only do I see the same page, but they're connected. So I can scroll down on my phone, and it's scrolling down. One more flick, please. Yes. So I have like a piece of marble already in front of me that I can start chiseling away. And it all took about, well, let's see, the install, the first time, and keep in mind, this is only one time ever on your machine that you need to install the generator. Then running it is only once per project, 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Running grunt serve took 6 seconds. So for a total of 3 minutes and 21 seconds. So that's pretty cool. Now I can just start designing in the browser. Is this special? Well, for me it is because, well, like I said, everything is just linked up. My CSS is linked up to my HTML. JavaScript is linked up. It's all just working together. And there's this blank JavaScript file that I can immediately just start adding functions to. So I'll test it out. I'll say, hello, Zurich. If I save this file, by the time I go back to the browser, it's already reloading, kind of. Yep, there it is. So JavaScript is working. It's jQuery's in place. I can just start writing, you know, $sign element thing and just start going. Plus there's Bootstrap. Bootstrap, anyone familiar with Twitter Bootstrap? Okay, not everybody, that's good. Again, this is kind of a hot button topic, right? Frameworks. My only caveat here would be, you know, when I started out, if I were starting out now, I wouldn't know what to do with a framework. I would be better served by just trying to write some basic markup and see how it works. And by the time I got my head around it, then at some point I would realize that other people have built these kinds of patterns that just work out of the box and can really help me kind of get stuff done faster. And I can, you know, use it as a framework to move on from there. So that for me is Bootstrap. I use it in a lot of projects, and this web app comes with Bootstrap out of the box. Now, let's just do a quick, for the sake of this demo, I'm not going to mark up, you know, there are certain things you can't automate. You can't automate the design of your app. So I'm just going to take a template that I found on this Start Bootstrap. It's just like a marketing page, right? So this will be, let's pretend that this is my wireframe for my marketing page for my client. And then to design it, I'm just going to tweak what's there. I'm going to add some styles. I think I added about 10 lines of code. I changed the content. I added 4 images. And now I have this sort of salmon background with dark gray text on it. I mean, it's like the new blue and white. It's beautiful. It's responsive. My menu is functioning with a little transition. It's all just, this is my design. My first draft of my design that I'm going to share with my client. And if I look in the dev tools, I can turn on the emulator and I can see what it should look like on an iPhone 5, for example. Of course, this is not a device. This is not running the same operating system. It's just kind of an approximation. But still, it's cool. This more or less how it's going to look on a device, the Nexus 7. So if you have a Nexus 7, you can check it out. This might look like that. So I'm done. I'm happy with my first draft. I'm calling this the first draft. And I'm going to call up the client. All right, check out the design. And this is where I introduce a young man by the name of Stephen Hay, whose responsive design workflow book, it's great. If you haven't read it, please check it out. He's got a bunch of great ideas. And one of the things that he talks about, which really resonated with me, was what to show the client at what point in the process. And his argument is that we shouldn't show the client, if we're designing something in a browser, we have a mock-up ready or design in the browser, don't show that to the client first, because you should show them static images of the design first, because first of all, it keeps the focus of the conversation on design issues, on layout and colors and spacing and things like that. You don't want the client to look at the first design and start saying, oh, this hover state is bullshit, and this transition, that's for later. Like, that's not the first round. And secondly, it doesn't give the client the impression that you're further along in the process than you are. You're designing in the browser, but we're not. They're going to say, "Oh, they're already building the website, and we haven't even approved the design." Well, that's not true. We're just designing it. We're just designing it in the platform that it's intended for. So we're going to do screenshots. So preparing screenshots for a presentation. Now, this guy might have done it like this. We're going to size the browser to a good size. I'm not exactly sure how big it is, but it's an approximation of a good size. I'm going to take a screenshot, and I'm going to paste it in Photoshop. I didn't speed this video up because I want you to really feel this one. You're gonna scroll down, and then you're going to do it again. But you might be a pixel off because you don't remember exactly. I can't even read how big it is, but I'm going to be close. I can always crop the Photoshop file later. Change the opacity, line it up nicely, pixel perfect. Great. Now let's go back and get one more of those. And this is a really easy page, and it's only one page. Imagine if you had a long page, and I've had long pages in the past. And then if you have to do this for multiple resolutions, how many days are you spending doing this? Almost there. All right, one is done now. Oh, you just got to crop it. So we're going to use some tools to speed this up. And this is where I like to introduce this gentleman, Sindrasaurus. I think he's Norwegian. He works for the military, the Norwegian military cyber defense department, I think. But he does a bunch of really cool projects on the side. He was also a core member of the Yeoman dev team. And he's also the 23rd most followed person on GitHub. So that's pretty impressive. And he built this really cool tool called PageRes, and it's designed to take screenshots, to automatically grab screenshots of websites at different resolutions. It's based on Phantom.js, which is a headless browser. So it's a browser without a graphical interface. It's got the same rendering engine as Chrome and Safari. So it's a real browser. You can send it JavaScript. It's used a lot for testing. And there's a Grunt plugin for PageRes. So to install it, we're just going to run npm install grunt PageRes. I should have put save dev here. That's a mistake. I should redo this one, because then it'll be saved in my JSON file for next time if I use this on a different machine, then it'll know it needs PageRes. Okay, so that took 25 seconds. Now, I just go to the documentation on the GitHub page. It says usage. Here's the basic usage. Just copy and paste it. Copy. And then this is my grunt file. So paste. And this is multiple URLs. He's giving you an example of how you would do more than one URL, but I only have one page anyway, so I'm just going to comment this part out. I'm just going to put the right URL there, which is my localhost 9000, remember? And then I'm just going to customize this destination directory. I want it to go into like images/screenshots. So that's that. And then I just need to add the PageRes task to my serve task array so that it gets launched or it gets run every time I do grunt serve. Okay, now let's just Run grunt serve and see what happens. It says, oh, it does its thing, it launches the browser, but if we go back to the terminal, it says running page res. Cha-ching, 2 screenshots from 1 URL and 2 resolutions. So let's see if they're there where they should be. Images, screenshots. Hey, that thing that it just took me like an hour to do in Photoshop has done twice in 2 seconds. So to take this a little bit further, this guy's of course super psyched because you see how fast that was. That was fun. I'm just going to do like, okay, a generic phone size, a generic tablet size, and then like an HD desktop size. And save it. Run grunt serve again. Go back, it's going to launch the browser automatically, and then if we come back, we see it's still doing its thing. It's taking a little longer because it's making 1 more than last time. But it's done. Okay, good. Let's go see if they're there. And it just added them to this folder. So there's the phone size. There's my tablet size. And there's my HD size. Okay, cool. So now, another thing we could do is create another HTML file and like call it designs, right? And just paste links to those images in the designs file. And what will happen is anytime I make a change to the site, to my design, it'll refresh the app, it'll change the design, and then it'll recreate screenshots at those resolutions. So these will always be up to date. Anytime I deploy, I know that if the client goes to that URL to see the state of the new designs, they'll always be updated. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do any dragging or pasting. It's done. And nobody would ever have to know that these weren't created in Photoshop or Sketch. Nobody would have to know that these were actually done with like an hour of wrangling some code and like 2 minutes of installing a task, a grunt task. So that's screenshots. Now this is of course a very, very, very simple, stupid, simple example, right? Just a 1 page, with 3 images on it. What if I'm doing a big CMS site with lots of different page types, or a platform with lots of users and lots of data that's changing? Well, that's exactly what I'm doing right now in my work with Voice Republic. Voice Republic is a platform for spoken word content, so like lots of audio content from conferences and speaker series. And I joined the team about 3 months ago, and we're right in the middle of a huge redesign, of course. So I can show a quick demo of one of the phases of this redesign. This is sort of a work in progress of the design of one of the aspects of it. There's a browse feature. You can click one of the topics, and then you get a grid-based view of the first dozen or so thing. This is my in-browser mock-up. It's also responsive. So things disappear at certain viewports, widths, and reappear, and it stretches to the edges of the browser. And the thing is, it was important to me to not use lorem ipsum or just pretty images that I found on the web. I wanted to use real content from the site so that it would look like it might look in a real world scenario. Because people are going to upload ugly photos, and people are going to type in 700 character titles. So what do you do with that? So I wanted to kind of grapple with that. So let's see how we can make something like this using real data and components that we can quickly iterate on our designs. And what we're going to do is use a static site generator. Static site generator, and Tomas and Olga are going to go into more detail about static site generators tomorrow, so check out their talk. A static site generator basically uses templates and flat content sources like markdown files and JSON files and components to build flat HTML pages. It's great for small sites and sites that don't need to be updated all the time, but I also use it for mocking up bigger sites using fake data that I get from other places. This is all the known static site generators. There's like 394 of them. The one I use is called Assemble. And I probably found assemble because it has a yeoman generator. It was like, oh, static site generator, yeoman, assemble. And I love it. So I'm just going to run it. Yo assemble, best project ever. And it's the same, it's very similar to the process of running the web app generator. It just pulls in a bunch of files. Again, a whole lot of NPM, blah, 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 blah. This is where I get up and get a coffee. Oh, it's already done, shit. Okay, now I'm running grunt server. And there's already a site. It's got a nav bar that's working. It's got a couple pages. And here's the structure of the directory. So there's assets folder for styles and JavaScript images. There's a content folder for your markdown files. If you want to make a blog with a static site generator, you can just do all your blog entries in markdown, and they'll be automatically compiled to HTML files. It's a data folder for JSON files. It's like kind of local databases, almost flat databases. Layouts is where we have our templates, so the different page types. The pages are what become the final HTML pages, what will show up in the nav bar. And then partials are your components, like snippets of code that you can reuse a bunch of times. And it's based on handlebars as its templating language. And it's super simple. It just has these like expressions. This is kind of like a variable. It says, here, put a thing from the data here, or put a component here. And this is what it looks like. In the default template, you have this expression. It just says, throw your navbar fixed top right there. And there's the navbar fixed top file. Inside that file is where the sort of magic of handlebars happens, is each loop. So it says, for each thing in the pages folder, create a list item and put a link in there and give it the relative link to this to that file and give it the title of the page as the content of the link. It's super simple. So let's just test it out by creating a fake file. Let's call it test. This is the basic structure that the handlebars file needs to have, this YAML front matter. I'm just going to put an expression saying, put the title of this page here. And then if I save that, by the time I get back to the browser, I'll save it as test.handlebars, HBS. By the time I get back to the browser, it's probably already going to be there. There it is, test. And there's the title, and the page is called test, so my expression is working. So how are we going to create a grid of cards like this? Well, it's actually pretty simple. One way you could do it is, of course, like this. Do the basic markup for one, and then copy and paste it and replace the content each time, right? That's already a lot of keystrokes. That's a lot of copying and pasting. But what happens when you need to change something in the layout? You need to change them all now. I would need to do like some complicated searching and replacing if possible. Well, there's a better way to do it, and that's using this static site generator. Three things. You have your data file with one entry for each card. You have the component, which has the markup for the card that the data gets inserted into. And then you have this loop that says, for each entry, grab a component, put this data in it, and write it to the HTML file. And since this is my demo, and I'm a Beatles fan, and there's plenty of data about the Beatles on the web, I'm going to do a grid of cards for the Beatles discography. And this is my beautiful sketch. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say that I have to disagree with the Egger brothers on this. I still use Photoshop. I use Illustrator. I use Sketch. I use Axure. I sketch things on paper. I use any tool that I feel like is going to help me get to the design to a place where I feel I'm ready to go in the browser, because I do work much faster in Illustrator doing certain things. If I want to get the basic look and feel of something, I'm much faster in Illustrator. So I'll just use it for a thing. I'll design a component in Illustrator, for example. And then I'll go to the web and say, okay, what would this look like if I multiply it across a screen? This is my data file. I just copied some CSV file or some spreadsheet of the Beatles discography from the web, and I tweaked it a little bit. I added links to the cover out, the art for the covers here. I put some descriptions from allmusic.com. And this is my data. Now, Assemble needs its data in JSON format. So how do we get this to JSON? I can save this as a CSV file into my project directory, and then I can use a grunt convert task. This is a grunt convert task was written by John Schlinkert, who also developed Assemble. I install it with npm, of course. This time I correctly put save dev, so it's there for the next time I clone the repository. This takes 10 seconds. Copy the basic usage example from the README file, paste it into my grunt file. I just need to change these paths so that they're correct. I want to read a Beatles.csv file, and I want to write a Beatles.json file. That's all I changed. And then I just add the convert task to my server array, and this is what I get when I run it. This is the JSON file of the Beatles discography. So step 1 is done. Now I need step 2, the component. So I'm going to put it in this partials folder. I'm going to say new file. I'm going to call it album. And this is going to be the markup for the card. So what does the card look like? Well, my sketch, it looked a lot like a Bootstrap thumbnail. So I'm just going to go to Bootstrap, and I'm going to grab the thumbnail markup, and I'm going to paste it into my file. And the only thing I need to change is this placeholder text. So I need to change the image source to the URL from the data file. So that's going to be the handlebars expression for the cover. And then the title expression is going to go, it's going to, if somebody doesn't see the image, then they're going to see the title of the album. Then the title should, of course, be the title of the thumbnail. And then inside the title there expression. And then inside this p tag, I just want the description. So it should say description, which is the key from the data file, and the value would be the content of the description. It gives you 2 buttons. I don't want 2 buttons at the bottom of my tile. I just want one that says buy now. So that should be our component. And then finally, we just need the grid. So that's going to be an HTML page, in this case, a handlebars page that will be converted to an HTML page. It's called discography, and we'll save it as discography.handlebars. All I need here is the loop. It says grab each thing from the data file called Beatles and paste an album. So however many entries there are in the JSON file, it's just going to go and just print one of those components there. And because I used that Bootstrap markup with those responsive classes, they should line up more or less in a grid. So that's my loop. And it's already there. I click discography, and I have a beautiful Beatles discography grid. Now, of course, it's not a grid because there's a problem. These descriptions are way too long, and they're, of course, all different lengths, so I can never get a grid out of this. So I'm going to resort to the further powers of handlebars and assemble and static site generators in general. I'm going to use a handlebars helper called truncate. So if I just say truncate the description, I can give it a character limit. And they'll all be cut short at that character limit. So if I say truncate description 200, it's going to limit the characters in the description. I'll put, just for the sake of the demo, I'll put a fake more button just to make the client happy. Go back to the browser. Do I have to hit the next button? I guess so. Now I have a beautiful grid of Beatles. So again, really simple content, right? Just a basic grid. But I hope that it shows the usefulness of this concept of using components and flat data files to populate a UI and make almost instantaneous changes to it. That would be much harder to do with flat HTML, let alone Photoshop. So we looked at software that makes a powerful in-browser design environment. We got to know some powerful command line-based tools. We saw how we can scaffold out a responsive Bootstrap-based site in just over 3 minutes using Yeoman. We saw how we can leverage the power of a framework like Bootstrap and the Chrome dev tools and the emulator to see how our design might respond on different devices. We saw how easy it is to generate screenshots of our browser designs at various sizes in like seconds using PageRes. And we saw how we can quickly build a data-intensive mockup using static site generator like assemble, along with the local data source and the grunt convert task. So if you have any thoughts about these tools, or if you know other tools that you use that are better, let me know. I'm always interested in learning new tricks, so come talk to me. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second here.
All right.
These tools, a lot of these tools are pretty opinionated,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So Yeoman's got the generators, and I know that we can change them, and we can make our own generators and stuff like that, but keeping with the theme of command line for designers.
Yes.
And designers, as soon as you say something like just make this array and put your JSON here or whatever, they're, they kind of start drooling and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So you get a lot of design sameness when people start trying to use these tools, but they don't know enough about what's happening in the background to be able to change that kind of thing and make it their own. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, that's a tough one. I think it comes down to, maybe it just comes down to taste, and I don't want to get too technical. I don't want to tweak my own generator or build my own generator. I just want to find one that gets me where I want to go. And for me, personally, that is kind of a framework that kind of jumpstarts my UI. And then I just tweak the shit out of it. Like, that's my personal approach. It's not for everybody. I mean, I know that a lot of people are gonna, roll their eyes and install and npm. It's no way, man, and that's fine. Like, if I just found for me that this is exactly like just enough technical that it speeds things up for me, but not so technical that I get lost for days in technology like that. And that's all that I tried to say at the beginning. Like, these are tools that work for me for certain projects, and it's not going to be for everybody. But yeah, I guess that's the question with frameworks, like the sameness factor. But I think you just have to know. You have to play with it enough to know how to change it into what you want it to be.
So it's a kind of a time investment that you make, and then you get results back by being able to like customize stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I spent a lot of time so far with Bootstrap. So like, I know if I see something, if I sketch something out, or if I make a design of something, I can see right away, oh, I could tweak a Bootstrap component to look like this really fast, much faster than I could build it myself. Or, nah, it's something too custom, I'm gonna just build it myself. And that's the thing with this assemble, like those partials, those components. I mean, it's really simple. It's a really simple block of code. I could easily just, and of course I do oftentimes just write a component myself, because it's just a container, and then something inside the container that's on the left side, and something inside the container that's on the right side, and boom, So I don't need to use Bootstrap. But sometimes it just works. It's like, oh, that's close enough to a thumbnail. I'll just use that. Then I'll probably go in and I'll straighten out the corners, and I'll remove the drop shadow, and I'll put a background, and I'll change the button, and I'll change the font, and then all of a sudden it doesn't look like Bootstrap anymore. That's my feeling.
Okay, let's open it up a bit. Any questions from the audience here? Yes. Run over here.
Oh boy.
Get ready.
No, come on. I was just wondering how you manage the deployment. You say, okay, you use some Node.js magic, but actually, how do you do that?
Well, I originally had intended on talking about it, but when I showed this to my developer friends, they were like, it's a little confusing. Because I use a Git FTP component. It's not really Git. It's like I think it's a shell script that kind of uses Git to tell which files to dump and which files to replace and stuff like that.
In the background, it's an FTP connection.
It's an FTP because the guy who wrote this Git FTP thing, he wrote it specifically for these kind of consumer hosting solutions where they don't have secure. They just have FTP, so it's like a simple way to to do it. And I use it all the time. I just copy the config, into my config file, and I just use it like that. It's super easy. I just make a commit, and then I can say, git f2p push, and it does everything. But that's only, of course, FTP, and there's a lot of grunt and gulp tasks that'll do deployment to Amazon and whatever, and SSH stuff. So it's possible. There's plenty of possibilities.
Any other questions? No? You all just get it? I have to admit, when you, if you want to impress your boss, like who's walking by, your boss who knows nothing about code, just type npm install -g and then anything else, and it'll just like download the entire internet. Ever use npm? You're like, what the hell is it all downloading? Yeah.
Yes.
So that's pretty impressive. If you sped it up, right?
I sped it up because I wanted to show the whole thing, so I could really show. It only took 2 minutes, but I mean, it's boring. There's that initial spinning thing, and sometimes that lasts for a minute, and you're like, oh, is it doing anything, or is it just broken? But eventually, stuff starts like spilling down.
It's like they can. I'm sure they use it in movies, where some hacker goes behind, and someone actually just typed npm install, so you just see all this stuff going down.
Yes, it looks like bullshit.
All right, well, give another hand to Nick. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.